After I raised him alone and gave him everything, he abandoned me for his gold-digging wife. He even refused to let me attend the rehearsal dinner. But at the wedding, I stood up with one letter in hand and tore his perfect world apart. The string quartet played softly as guests laughed and clinked champagne glasses. Everyone was dressed in perfection, silk gowns, polished shoes, neatly parted hair. But I stood at the edge of it all, half-shadowed by the tall pillars of the grand ballroom. No one noticed me. Not my son. Not his new wife. Not the man I'd spent my life raising. He looked so handsome in that tuxedo, standing at the altar with pride in his eyes. Amanda held his hand like she owned him, and maybe now, she did. My fingers clenched tightly around the envelope in my purse. My heart beat like a war drum, but my face showed nothing. I hadn't planned to make a scene. That was never my intention. I only came to see for myself, to look into the eyes of the boy I raised alone for 29 years and find out if there was anything left of him behind that polished smile. My mind flashed back to the moment I knew things had changed for good. It was 3 nights before the wedding. He called me, not to check in, not to say he loved me, but to tell me that Amanda didn't think it would be appropriate for me to attend the rehearsal dinner. She says it's more of a modern thing. You know, for friends, younger folks. Don't take it personally, Mom. Don't take it personally? I laughed after he hung up, though it wasn't from humor. I laughed because I realized then, I had lost him. Somewhere between Amanda's curated Instagram posts and her father's deep pockets, my son had forgotten the woman who once walked 10 miles in the snow with a toddler wrapped in her coat, just to get him to a doctor. I didn't cry that night. Not when he told me I wasn't welcome. Not even when he said, "You'll ruin the vibe." But now, standing in the back of that hall, I could feel the tears press behind my eyes. Not out of sadness anymore, but out of a resolve I hadn't felt in years. The envelope burned against my hip like a secret too powerful to hold much longer. Inside it was a letter I had written by hand, every line soaked with memory and truth. A letter that would speak louder than any scream. A letter that would remind him who I was, what I had done for him, before he rewrote our story with someone new. And in that moment, with Amanda tossing her golden hair and my son beaming like a groom out of a movie, I knew exactly when I would deliver it. Not now. Not yet. But soon. Right. When the room was full of laughter. When the champagne was highest. When he thought he had everything. That's when I'd give him my gift. A gift he'd never forget. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Tyler used to run into my arms the moment he saw me, screaming "Mommy," like I was the center of his universe. I raised him on my own after his father left us when Tyler was only 3. I juggled 3 jobs to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads, working night shifts at a diner, weekends at a dry cleaner, and part-time office work during the day just so he wouldn't feel like he missed out on a real childhood. I gave him everything. Every penny I earned, every ounce of my strength. I never remarried, never went on dates, never thought of myself, because he was my world. His first car? I bought it with money saved from skipping meals and canceling doctor's appointments for myself. His college tuition? I cashed in my retirement fund and sold my wedding ring. The one heirloom I had. And for a while, it felt like he saw that. He'd hug me tight and say, "One day, I'm gonna take care of you, Mom. I promise." But then Amanda came into the picture. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Confident, stylish, always smiling that rehearsed smile like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Tyler brought her over for dinner one night, and from the moment she stepped through my front door, she looked like she didn't belong. Like she didn't want to belong. She barely touched the casserole I spent hours making, scrolled through her phone at the table, and when I showed them Tyler's baby pictures, she laughed, and said, "Oh my God, babe, you were such a chubby little thing." I brushed it off. I wanted to believe she just needed time. But time only made things worse. Tyler started calling less. Visiting less. Every decision he made began with "Amanda thinks," or "Amanda wants," and soon, I started hearing rumors from friends, little things at first. That Amanda bragged about his new salary. That she talked about buying a condo and helping him cut ties with the old life. Old life? That was me. But the moment that broke me came 6 months before the wedding. Tyler sat me down at a coffee shop, and with an apologetic look, said they were thinking of moving out of state after the wedding. Amanda had a job offer in California, and it'll be good to have a fresh start, he said. But what about me? I asked. We'll visit. Holidays maybe, he said, sipping his latte like it was just another day. I looked at the boy in front of me and didn't recognize him. His eyes were colder. His voice less familiar. Like the years I spent holding his hand through storms had been reduced to something replaceable. That was the first time I felt it, the sting of being discarded. Then came the rehearsal dinner rejection. And that's when I stopped being hurt and started paying attention. If Amanda thought she could erase me from his life, she was wrong. If Tyler thought he could push me into the background and keep smiling through speeches and champagne, he was about to learn that some mothers don't go quietly. The envelope in my purse wasn't just a letter. It was my final gift. A reminder. A reckoning. And I was going to deliver it at the exact moment it would matter most. The days leading up to the wedding felt like a strange kind of grief. I wasn't losing my son to death, but something inside him had already vanished. The boy who used to draw me Mother's Day cards with stick figures and crooked hearts had turned into a man I barely recognized. And the hardest part? I had no one to talk to about it. My friends tried to comfort me. He's just in love, they said. He'll come around. But they didn't know what I did. They hadn't heard Amanda's sharp tone when she thought no one was listening, or seen the look she gave me that night I offered her a family quilt Tyler had as a baby. She didn't even touch it. Just wrinkled her nose and said, "We don't really do sentimental." I was being erased, piece by piece. Still, I smiled. I played along. I even offered to help with the centerpieces. Amanda said she'd let me know, then ordered everything from a luxury wedding planner. I was told I could attend the wedding, but there was no role for me. No mother-son dance. No seat at the rehearsal dinner. Not even a mention in the program. And that's when the past started flooding in. I remembered sitting up late with Tyler, rubbing his back when he had nightmares. The way he used to cry into my shirt, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mom." I remembered driving 6 hours through a snowstorm to get him back to college when his car broke down. I remembered pulling double shifts when he wanted to go on that school trip to DC because all the other kids were going. I remembered sacrificing my life so he could build his. And now that he'd built it, I wasn't even allowed inside. There was a box I kept in my closet. A wooden one with Tyler's name carved into the top. Inside were pieces of his childhood, his baby bracelet, a drawing of me holding his hand, a spelling bee ribbon, a letter he wrote in 3rd grade saying, "You're the best mommy in the whole world." I sat with that box the night before the wedding. And I cried. Not angry tears, but the kind of quiet, exhausted sobbing that comes from years of pouring yourself into someone, only to be left behind like old furniture. But as I stared at that box, something inside me shifted. I thought of all the women who'd been cast aside once they were no longer needed, mothers, wives, daughters. How we were expected to just fade away, to smile through the pain, to be gracious and understanding as we were replaced. But not this time. I had done nothing wrong. I had loved my son with everything I had. And if he wanted to stand at the altar pretending I didn't exist, I'd remind him exactly who helped him get there. I wasn't going to scream or cause a scene. No. I was going to be calm. Elegant. Devastating. Because the most powerful revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from truth. And the truth was written in a letter I'd folded with trembling hands, sealed with quiet sorrow, and tucked carefully into my purse. A letter that held everything he needed to know about loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of forgetting where you come from. The wedding was hours away. And I was ready. The morning of the wedding dawned with clear skies and golden sunlight pouring through the window. But inside, I felt anything but warm. I wore a navy blue dress, nothing flashy, just graceful. The kind of dress a mother wears when she's been told to stay out of the way. But in my purse was something far louder than any outfit I could have chosen. The letter. I had spent days writing it. Not in anger, but in clarity. Every word chosen with precision, every sentence layered with quiet truth. It wasn't meant to embarrass Tyler. It was meant to remind him. To bring him face to face with the woman who raised him, not just the image he now saw as disposable. Tyler had once promised me he'd never forget where he came from. That no matter how successful he became, we'd always be a team. But here we were, on the biggest day of his life, and I was being treated like a stranger. I arrived at the venue early, even though I hadn't been invited to the rehearsal or pre-wedding photos. The wedding planner gave me a look, one of those tight, fake smiles that says, "You're not really welcome here." I smiled back, more genuinely. I didn't need approval. I needed timing. As guests began arriving, I stayed in the back. I watched Amanda float through the crowd like a queen, perfect hair, perfect makeup, that smug little smile that said she thought she'd won. Her parents clinked champagne glasses with the groomsmen. Everyone was basking in the glow of their curated fairy tale. They had no idea what was coming. When the music began to play and guests took their seats, I waited. I didn't want to ruin the ceremony. No, I had more taste than that. I let Tyler walk down the aisle, let him say his vows, let Amanda blink those long lashes as she promised to love him through everything. I even clapped with the crowd when they were pronounced husband and wife. But the reception, that was mine. The ballroom glittered with gold accents and soft candlelight. A string quartet played as waiters passed hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Amanda was radiant, and Tyler looked proud. Toasts began, first Amanda's father, then her maid of honor, then his best friend. Each one more rehearsed than the last. And then, as the DJ began to announce the next speech, I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm but clear, "I'd like to say a few words." As the groom's mother. There was an awkward silence. Amanda's face tightened. Tyler looked surprised. The DJ hesitated, then handed me the mic. I stood at the front of the room, holding the letter in my hand. "I wasn't asked to speak today," I began. In fact, I wasn't asked to do much at all. But I did everything for this young man, from the day he was born until the day he decided someone else mattered more. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. "I'm not here to shame anyone," I said. "I'm here to give a gift. One last gift from a mother to her son." I opened the envelope slowly, the paper trembling just slightly in my fingers. Tyler's face changed, just a flicker, but it was enough. This was the moment. The turning point. The beginning of something none of them had planned for. Because my words weren't just words. They were the start of his unraveling. I unfolded the letter slowly, the kind of slow that makes people hold their breath without even realizing it. My fingers didn't shake. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I was ready. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind too many times to count. And now, in a ballroom full of chandeliers, champagne, and lies, I was going to tell the truth. "Tyler," I began, looking directly at him. "This is the letter I wrote for you last night. But it's not new. I've been writing it for years. Line by line. Every time you forgot me. Every time you picked someone else. Every time you traded loyalty for luxury." The room was silent. Amanda had stopped smiling. Her hands were clenched around her glass. Tyler's face, once flushed with post-wedding excitement, had started to pale. "I raised you alone," I said softly. "When your father left, I worked 2 jobs to pay for your school, your books, your dreams. I skipped dinners to make sure you had enough to eat. I sat in hospital rooms while you recovered from surgeries. I missed promotions because your science fairs always came first. And I never, not once, made you feel like you were a burden." I saw it then, his guilt creeping up like a slow tide. "But in the last year, I stopped recognizing you," I continued. "You introduced me to Amanda, and I welcomed her with open arms. I helped plan the engagement dinner, paid for the florist when your budget ran short, and smiled through every insult she threw my way." Amanda's jaw tightened. She shifted in her seat, whispering something to her mother, but her voice was drowned out by the weight of mine. "Then one day, you told me the rehearsal dinner was just for the younger crowd. That there weren't enough seats for me. That you'd make it up to me later." I paused and looked at him again. "You never did." The audience was now fully captive. Some were wide-eyed, others clearly uncomfortable. But I wasn't finished. "So today," I said, lifting my chin slightly, "I'm here to give you a wedding gift. One that may not come wrapped in a bow, but will stay with you longer than anything from your registry." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope, sealed with a red wax stamp. Slowly, I walked to their table and placed it right in front of Amanda. "This is a copy of a legal document I filed last week," I said. "Amanda, you may want to read it before dessert is served." Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, broke the seal, and scanned the letter inside. Her face, once smug, now drained of all color. "What is this?" she muttered, her voice cracking. This can't be real." Tyler snatched it from her hand. As his eyes scanned the text, I spoke again. "It's proof," I said. Proof that the investment I gave you last year, the $80,000 I transferred from my retirement to help you buy that house? I placed it in a trust under my name. Which means technically, the house you're living in right now doesn't belong to either of you. And starting next month, you'll owe rent. To me. There were audible gasps. And that business loan Amanda convinced you to sign in my name? I smiled. It bounced. Because I never signed it. I spoke directly with the bank and flagged the forgery. They're opening a fraud investigation. They said it might take months, but they're very interested in how your new wife accessed my documents. Amanda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Tyler looked like he'd been hit by a train. You gave up your mother for someone who was planning your financial funeral before you even said I do, I said, my voice soft, but cutting. And you didn't even notice. I took a step back and looked at the stunned room. I'm sorry to bring drama to such a beautiful night. But sometimes the truth shows up dressed in honesty instead of lace. And with that, I turned and walked away, past the tables of guests frozen mid-bite, past the string quartet that had gone silent, past the photographer who had stopped snapping photos. I didn't need to see Tyler's face again. I'd seen enough. I left that ballroom without another word. No tears. No apology. Just peace. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't screaming or slamming doors. It's letting people drown in the silence of their own choices. The evening air outside the venue was crisp, and as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. Not because I had delivered a speech or exposed lies, but because I had finally let go. The weight of years spent proving my worth, begging to be seen, and tolerating cold shoulders had lifted like smoke in the wind. A car pulled up, an old friend from church, who had insisted on waiting outside in case I needed a ride. I slid into the seat beside her, smiled, and said simply, "Take me home." But home wasn't the little apartment I'd been holding on to. 2 days after the wedding, I moved into a beautiful cottage just outside Asheville, something I had been quietly planning for months. It was peaceful, surrounded by trees and sunlight that filtered through lace curtains. I planted tulips in the yard, got a dog named Murphy, and joined a book club with women who laughed too loud and didn't care about appearances. For the first time in years, I wasn't Tyler's mom or someone's backup plan. I was just me. And that was enough. I'd be lying if I said Tyler didn't try to call. He did, many times. But I didn't pick up. He sent flowers, emails, even showed up once at my gate. But I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Some wounds don't ask for closure, they just ask for distance. I wasn't bitter. I didn't wish them harm. But I knew that sometimes, the only way to protect your heart is to stop giving it to people who treat it like an option. 6 months later, as I sat on my porch with Murphy at my feet and a warm cup of tea in my hands, I watched the sun sink behind the hills. There was no drama. No chaos. Just quiet. And in that silence, I found something that had eluded me for so long. Peace. The kind that doesn't need revenge to feel complete. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. Sometimes, the people we give the most to, give us back the least. This is a story about a mother who poured her soul into raising her son, only to be discarded like a forgotten chapter when he started a new one. It's a story so many older Americans relate to. You give everything, your youth, your love, your sacrifices, and when the moment comes where you expect warmth in return, you're handed silence, or worse, rejection. But here's the twist that made this story unforgettable: she didn't shout. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't argue or beg. Instead, she stood tall, spoke with grace, and told the truth, not just to her son, but to herself. That wedding day wasn't about destruction. It was about dignity. She reminded everyone in that room that while love can be unconditional, respect never should be. And when you've been forgotten by the very people you built your life around, sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply walking away with your head held high, while their world shakes behind you. She didn't need to ruin the party. She just needed to reclaim her voice. And in the end, she found the one thing her son's wealth, wife, or wedding could never offer her: peace. Not all victories come with confetti. Sometimes, they come with quiet sunsets, a dog curled at your feet, and no one asking you to prove your worth ever again. If this story touched your heart, even a little, hit that subscribe button. We tell real, powerful stories like this every week, stories that remind us that it's never too late to choose yourself, that revenge can be poetic, and that justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes, it wears a soft smile and walks out the door with grace.